Welcome to the Friday edition of FLIPSIDE Live, coming to you on this 14th day of March, a little after 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, broadcasting live from Rosarito Beach, Mexico, where I'm happy to report it's summertime on the coast, blue skies, no wind, and it looks as though I am gonna have a great St. Patrick's Day south of the border. And so there are numerous fine dining establishments that go out of their way to cater to the Irish tradition of St. Patrick's Day of corned beef and cabbage. And yes, they do celebrate St. Patrick's Day in Mexico. And pretty much like anywhere else on the planet that celebrates St. Patrick's Day, even Mexicans wear green on St. Paddy's Day. So, Chuck, outside of the good news about St. Paddy's Day, unfortunately, all the other news out there is not very positive. As a matter of fact, we are heading into a weekend where a lot of things could happen that nobody is anticipating. And just a quick check of the financial markets will confirm that. We've had a rise once again in gold price of $9.40 at $1,381. Silver up 24 at $21.41. The mining indexes on the plus side. The U.S. dollar index still below the support at 80, sitting at 79.43. And it looks like none of the traders in New York wanted to go into this weekend on the long side. And that was all predicated, obviously, on the statements made by John Kerry, pretty much drawing a red line in the sand and giving Russia until Monday to step down its actions in the Ukraine. I have spent this past week trying to find out as best I could the general consensus for the events in the Ukraine, and they pretty much all over the board. It just depends on which analyst or so-called foreign policy expert you listen to will depend on your understanding of what may or may not happen. I mean, we've run the gambit all the way up to the possibilities of a resurgence of the Cold War between U.S. and Russia, to some analysts going so far as to say this could be the spark that sets off World War III. From your vantage point there in Colorado, Chuck, what has been your take on the events that we have witnessed these last few days?
Well, Robbie, thanks for asking. Of course, I don't pretend to be an expert on affairs in the Ukraine or the Soviet Union. I've never been there. But we are a pretty good observer of our own government and their relationship with, first of all, our constant companion, the State of Israel, who we have referred to as our pit bull in the Middle East many times. We did a little paper on the Ukrainian situation just based upon a few logical things that we could see ourselves that didn't take any great expertise. And I start with a conclusion that we put forward in our video, The Tragedy and the Turning, and we put it forward in about everything we write. That is that our economy is war-based, that our leaders are raised as soon as they hit high politics to understand that they have to cater to the war lobby, and that includes, of course, the Federal Reserve Bank and the bankers' influence in making war, and what Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex. Other people refer to it as the defense industry or whatever you want to call it. But as everyone knows, I guess one half of our proposed budget deficit is going to be spent next year on our military money. So our government spends an enormous amount of our budget on the military. So war is a way of life in America. That's why we have so many. And so we viewed the Ukraine situation as soon as it popped up as another effort to kindle some kind of a conflict that can keep the war-making business machine perking along, our bankers happy, the investors happy, the U.S. Army and the Pentagon happy, and the rest of it unhappy, or ignorant, one or the other. So we saw this immediately. I looked at this immediately as an effort by Obama, carrying out the will of whoever it is who listens to carefully, to get something started. There's absolutely no reason for the United States to have any strategic interest, really, any significant strategic interest in Ukraine. Europe can protect itself, we would think, and we don't get any benefit out of it. So why are we taking an interest in the Ukraine? On the other hand, Russia has every reason to have a vital interest, and we published a very simple little paper on our website called "The Meaning of Russia in Crimea and Beyond" on March 6th, and that's on our website. And I think maybe you even posted it as well. And we see it not all about oil, but we see it as Russia is totally dependent upon the Ukraine, because during the many, many years that Ukraine and Russia were part of the same Soviet Union, the pipeline, and after that, the pipelines that go to Europe and carry all of the Ukrainian oil all of Russia's natural gas and oil. A good part of that goes right across Ukraine for hundreds of miles over many pipelines, probably 8 or 9, just crossing and going to every major city in Ukraine, and then on into Europe and all the way to Germany, where Russia finds its number one biggest buyer of oil and gas. It buys more oil and gas in Ukraine. So this is a simple economic thing. Russia has to protect that. There was a revolution starting in Ukraine, and Russia could see that a hostile interest taking over their pipelines. What do you do if your pipelines go across the neighbor's, if you're dependent on your electric line coming across the neighbor's yard and you have a hostile neighbor who wants to cut your electric line? So we don't have any interest there, but Russia has a lot. So the way I see it is that we're trying to make something out of this, and if a long-distance war could be whipped up, that could be keep the war machine going for years and years, I don't think that our leaders would be adverse to that. I think they feel like they kind of need that. So that's what our paper says. It explains it, talks a little about it, and it can be read there. And so I turn it back to you and see what you thought of the paper.
Well, I guess everything comes down to the Crimean vote that goes off on Sunday, and to see whether the people are going to vote to decide to remain part of the Russian Federation. And based on that decision, Sunday will also cause, as threatened by Kerry, for the U.S. and the European Union to impose crippling sanctions.
Right. This is what they proposed. So here we are, sitting thousands of miles away. We don't really buy that much. I don't know if we ship wheat from the Ukraine to the United States. I don't know what our imports are from Ukraine. But generally speaking, we sell a lot of stuff to Russia, but we don't buy much anything from them. Europe buys oil from them, gasoline, and natural gas that's very vital to these European countries. And so now you have all these European countries being pressed by our leadership. The Group of Seven has come out and said they're going to sanction Russia. Well, Russia wants to sell their oil to them, but it's actually Russia who's in position to sanction Europe, because they could stop selling natural gas to Germany, for instance. What is Europe's participation is going to be? I suspect that they will kind of back down. They're just giving lip service to the war-making machine in Great Britain and the United States. And that they'll probably kind of back down, I would think, because they need Russia, and Russia's an advantage to them. It's not that easy to get that big volume of natural gas from someplace else. The Crimea is a little place in the Black Sea. It's actually sort of a peninsula on the Ukraine. It's connected by what they call an isthmus. Looks like a pretty big isthmus, but sounds like the Crimeans are going to probably stand right up on Sunday and vote to secede from the Ukraine, because the Ukraine has a revolution going on there, sort of a revolution. A bunch of people were killed. Now there's suggestions by people like Israel Shamir and several other writers have said that Israel is actively participating in revolution in the Ukraine, that they're there carrying it out. And there's also, Shamir also claimed, and this I've not seen this verified, but he claimed that 300 members of Blackwater. You know, everybody knows who Blackwater is. It's the mercenary outfit that gets paid. It's become billionaire organizations in Iraq, and it's a mercenary group. And supposedly 300 Blackwater mercenaries are in Ukraine, carrying out executions and trying to stir up trouble there. So the people in Crimea don't want any part of this. They are basically Russians, and the lesser of two evils to them might just be Russia. That's connected to Crimea by this little narrow isthmus, and is actually very, very close to Russia. So chances are, what looks like is going to happen is that on Sunday the Crimeans are going to take up a vote, and if they get the votes counted fast enough on Monday morning, we're going to find out that they've seceded from the Ukraine. That seems like the course it's likely. And then Russia is simply going to say, well, we're ready to annex this seceded province if they want to be annexed. And this is what Obama says is fighting words. He says that if Crimea elects to become part of Russia and Russia accepts them, then that basically means war somehow. This is, or at least it justifies these so-called economic sanctions that we always put on everybody before we go to war with them. The first thing we do is we slap sanctions on them and make life miserable, and the next thing you know, we have another war going. So that's the direction of this. What's this going to do to economics? I think this is big stuff. I think you're right when you say that this is a serious matter. The United States has been able to carry out these wars against little groups, little organizations, little Irans and Iraqs, and Afghanistan's, distant people that we don't have any particular links with in terms of a business links. But here you're tackling the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union, you're tackling Russia. And we do have a lot of business interests there. And apparently there are some 800 American companies who actually have offices and businesses running in Russia. There's a United States Chamber of Commerce of American companies operating in Moscow. And Putin has simply said, well, don't get tough with us and start talking about sanctions. We can take over Exxon if we want to, or Citibank. They can take over the branches that are there in Moscow. So sounds like a pretty poor deal to me, throwing the gauntlet down with Russia over something we really have no benefit from. Significant benefit from either way.
Well, as is usually the case, U.S. State Department today has issued a travel alert for Americans traveling in Russia.
I was just thinking today, why don't we go? Let's go to Crimea after things quiet down a little bit, and then it's not very far from that site of the Olympics. That great, beautiful place. Be a good trip to see what's going on in Crimea. It looks pretty peaceful there to me. There hasn't been any uprising of any kind or any Crimea. It's been pretty much very quiet.
I was watching Al Jazeera earlier this morning where they were interviewing a spokesman from the Russian Foreign Ministry who attempted to make the analogy that the Ukraine's importance to Russia is similar to Britain's importance that it attaches to the Falklands. And just as Britain announced that the attack on the Falklands was done in order to protect the interests of British citizens in the Falklands, Putin is using a similar excuse for his actions in the Ukraine, and that he is doing it for no other reason than to protecting Russian interests in that part of Russia. But other analysts have said the difference between Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama is Vladimir Putin is playing chess while Barack Obama is playing marbles, and he is fast running out of marbles.
Well, the Falkland Islands are a long ways from Britain, but Crimea is actually connected to Russia and is very close. And again, this idea of the Russian pipelines run right into Crimea. That's where they get their oil and gas. So Putin has not said very much about this oil and gas connections and all of that. But the maps that you see of the Ukrainian pipeline connections just seems to me to tell the whole story. You just look at those maps and you can see how the last thing that Russia would want would be to have those connections sabotaged, taken over by adverse powers, bombed by drone attack or anything like that. So certainly Putin is certainly no angel, but he seems to be a pretty smart guy in dealing with the United States. And one thing I do like about it is I can understand his statements. When he says something, I can understand what he's talking about, and it seems like he's straightforward about what their interests are. Obama is kidding us about what our interests are. What are our? Nobody's ever even bothered to tell us why we care about the Ukraine or Crimea. Why do we care? Has anybody said?
Nobody has identified what a national security interest is involved in the U.S.'s interest in that area is. However, there's another major player in this whole diplomatic kerfuffle, and that is Angela Merkel. And there are some analysts that feel that Angela Merkel is carrying the water for the Zionist interests in the Ukraine.
Well, again, I think, Robbie, that the EU is in terrible shape, and it's a welfare case in its own rights. And I think they knuckle under a lot to what people like Obama, what our leaders say. They still are it seemed like they're almost taking the orders from the UK and the United States. So when Obama says sanctions, Mrs. Merkel says me too. But I don't know how far they're going to go with that, and maybe my information isn't correct about their needs of Russian petroleum. But my understanding is that's seems to be fairly uniformly agreed and understood. So, again, the United States is still a big war leader, and everyone sort of follows along there. And, of course, the silent partner in all of this, and a very silent one, is Israel, who carries out these dirty jobs like assassinating people and getting rid of, carrying out little revolutions. And it turned out that in the first revolution that was called the Maidan, I think it's pronounced Maidan Revolution in Kiev.
Yes.
A lot of people were shot, always in the head by snipers. They were expertly assassinated, both sides. It turns out that Israeli citizens were Israeli former military were leading this Maidan revolution. And apparently they didn't do the sniping, but there was a sniper team that was basically killing people on both sides. So that's how you start a revolution, is you get people together fighting and arguing with each other, and then you expertly assassinate some on each side, and they all blame the other. This is sort of standard kind of practice. Executions are something that Israel's very good at because they do it all the time in Gaza and the West Bank. And Israel's very quiet about all this, but their presence is there. And it's also true, according to several writers, that most of the oligarchs, many of the biggest criminal, mega money criminals, mega billionaire criminals, escape from Russia into Israel, where they live. Some live in London also, by the way. He lets them live there. These are the people that the Russian government under Putin drove out of Russia when they took back the National Oil Company and the National Television Company and some of those businesses. And so there's a huge business interest going on behind all of this. And that's why I think the stock market took a big plunge 2 days in a row, as you pointed out at the opening of this show. I think people who are savvy in stocks and have billions of dollars worth recognize that this is the kind of thing that might grow. And if that happens, it could be pretty serious for the stock market, the bond market, for a lot of them. This is something that could really backfire on us, Robbie, here in the United States. We could see the end of the great bull market over this.
Well, one of the stories that has been floated by many analysts out there, and that if the U.S. goes forward with any form of sanction against Putin, it is not out of the realms of possibility that Putin could retaliate by instructing the Russian Treasury to start offloading U.S. treasuries. And if Russia starts offloading U.S. treasuries, it'll snowball into a rush for the exits by other countries in support of Russia doing likewise. I don't think I have to remind you that Russia's key ally has been and always will be China.
Sure, they got, I don't know how many miles of border in common with China. Yeah, that's true. I don't know how many U.S. treasuries Russia owns, but their friends certainly own lots of them. Over $1 trillion in China, as I recall. Well over $1 trillion, and Japan has well over $1 trillion as well. So those are U.S. treasuries, and it was kind of a mystery to me that United States Treasury bonds went up. And almost like a panic reaction, people, big investment was flowing into United States 30-year Treasury bonds this week, as though that was a safe haven. It doesn't look very safe to me.
I think gold, without question, this week passing the 200-day moving average, established itself as the true safe haven. We've crossed a few milestones as far as resistance to higher gold prices is concerned, and we haven't seen this amount of nervousness in the financial markets in quite some time, and I'm just basing that off statements from old Wall Street curmudgeons such as Art Cashin from UBS, who doesn't see anything positive developing with the situation in Ukraine. And like Richard Russell, is advising people to pretty much stay out of the market, sit on the sidelines, and watch history unfold. And it is a unique time, and I don't want to sound too redundant here, Chuck, but you know that old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times? I think we are probably living in one of the more interesting times in my and your lifetime. How this turns out could quite easily be a game changer of epic proportion. And as John Embry said the other day, I'm not worried about a single black swan event, because there's a whole flock of black swans circling overhead, any one of which could set off a calamity of epic proportion.
That's true, Robbie. And if a visitor from outer space was to descend on all of this and take one look at it and listen to our conversation, he would probably say, well, these people will all come to their senses over the weekend. What will happen is that, yes, the people in Crimea will disassociate themselves from their old contact because of the ethnicity of them and because of the conflict they face. And yes, maybe they'll unite with Russia. Maybe they won't, but they'll make it look easy and comfortable. And then President Obama will decide that sanctions really aren't necessary. They'll get together with Vladimir Putin, drink a little vodka, and whatever. Putin doesn't do that, I guess. So they have to do something else. But if a logical person from outer space was to view all this, he would shrug his shoulders and say, well, this is all going to quiet down because it's insane for the United States to go any further. There's no reason for them to, and it can only result in calamity. But from the perspective that we've observed in our lifetime, your lifetime and mine, we know that our leaders are forcing us in the direction of these calamities all the time, one after another. And it isn't by accident, it's by design that we have a constant war brewing at all times on the back burner of the stove while the current war is being quietly put out and phased out. And then we look at the ashes of the destroyed countries. It's like kind of like the situation between Israel and Palestine. That's a microcosm of evil, and basically on the face of the globe. It is so obvious what's happening there, what Israel does, but the giant mega press is able to throttle it down to the point where enough people can't really believe it's happening so that it continues to go on. And the same is true of the situation we're looking at. The only logical thing is for everybody to shrug this off and look for peace and look for a little justice for the people in Ukraine and try to, generate business. Try to do business and not do war. Unfortunately, that's not what's going to happen because we just aren't wired that way. You're on a different circuit. And so Obama is going to go ahead with sanctions. You can count on it because he isn't bluffing. He's been told to do that by whoever advises him. He listens to the bankers, I suppose. And Russia is going to protect their interests. They're going to try to protect their ability to sell their products to not just to Ukraine but to other countries. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen because against all logic, it's going to happen. And how far it'll go, we can only hope that it doesn't result in World War III, but it could. World War III could be fought with drones. By the way,
well, who was it? Who was it? I'm trying to think of one of the great philosophers of the past says, I don't know how World War III will be fought, but what I do know is that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
It wasn't George Orwell, but he predicted World War III. I don't know who said that. World War IV was sticks and stones.
I don't think. I don't think the U.S. has faced a situation of this magnitude, and I hope I'm not overhyping this by saying there are similarities one can draw between the standoff with Ukraine and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because a lot of this also has to do with Russia's disdain about the growing influence of NATO in Eastern Europe. It wasn't that long ago that we faced a similar crisis when another Eastern European country was involved in a standoff with Russia, and that was Georgia. Remember that from a few years ago?
Yep. I think 2008, isn't it? Is it that long ago? Anyway.
Yeah, and we ended up finding out that the majority of Georgian military equipment was and training was supplied by Israel.
Exactly. It's the old idea that Israel comes in and does these little dirty jobs. And I think that's going to be revealed. By the way, I started to say, I don't know if you noticed it today, but the Russians announced that they brought down a American Predator drone over Ukraine. Actually, it was over Sevastopol. Is that the name of that city? In Crimea. And they brought it down, they captured it, they had the serial numbers and everything. It was flying around part of a U.S. reconnaissance squadron in some other country that was just mysteriously snooping over all of this. So we have all this stuff going on, and it would be nice if we could wake up and everybody would take a look at the potential consequences and say, well, we just don't want to do this. We want to work this out. But it doesn't look that way.
Well, I think when the one analyst said that, Putin is playing chess while Obama is playing with marbles, and he doesn't have any marbles left, he was referring to the fact that financially the U.S. can ill afford to get itself embroiled in another international conflict because the bottom line is the U.S. is broke.
Yes. And the idea of war is that if you can take people's minds off being broke, you can get away with going ahead and printing some more money and sending the product of that money, the machines that are produced someplace like Ukraine, 10,000 miles from home, and dump it there. And as long as you can keep the printing presses going, you have the illusion of prosperity continuing. Did you notice, Robbie, that Unity Coalition for Israel has gotten themselves into the act? Do you know who Unity Coalition for Israel is? An organization that is like AIPAC in one respect, and that is that it is fully 100% owned by the State of Israel. It's a state agency of the State of Israel, but it operates exclusively inside the United States. It used to be called National Coalition for Israel. National Coalition for Israel, and that implied that it was American. And some of the people that were board members on it, sort of front men on it, kind of resented the name because they said it was creating the illusion it was American when all of the directors were Russian, were Israelis. This is the organization that started CUFI, Christians United for Israel, And that's about 10 years ago when John Hagee started that organization. It was actually seeded off from Unity Coalition for Israel. And Unity Coalition for Israel has come out with some very bold statements about this war thing. And one of the things they're doing is they're picking on Obama. They're saying that he's being too, he's appeasing the Russians. He's being weak and weak-kneed. And here's a statement out of the latest Unity Coalition for Israel's publication. Every liberal today wants peace. Every diplomat wants to be a peacemaker. Their brand of peace, whether it is the negotiation with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, or the Palestinian terrorists, is worthless. The only peace that counts is the one projected by the men of the Strategic Air Command who live the knowledge that the profession of peace can only be practiced with the tradecraft of war. So this is what Unity Coalition for Israel is telling Christians United for Israel. And their purpose, of course, is that they keep stirring up the Christian Zionist movement in America in support of these wars. Their job, their task, is to operate through people like John Hagee and to give him information, data, and philosophy of war that he's supposed to then spread through his organizations. And everybody should get on the mailing list of Unity Coalition for Israel because it is the secular voice of Christian Zionism. It's the way Israel expresses what they want Christian Zionists to do in America. And of course, what he's calling for here is they want pressure put on Obama to be more warlike and to be more aggressive with dealing with Russia. They're blaming Obama for being soft on Russia, and he's not hitting hard enough. He's not aggressive enough in this situation that we now have. So Israel constantly comes up with a role in these things, and they operate so much of the time at the grassroots in America through our churches, which they then try to mobilize to basically support whatever war is being promoted, be it Iraq, be it the upcoming chance of war in Iran or Afghanistan or wherever it is.
Well, my friend, it seems as though, there are a number of other pressing issues that are also not really making much of a headline, but watching a program the other evening on Al Jazeera, they were pointing out the cost to the children of Syria for that ongoing crisis. And I was quite amazed that there has been very little, if any, coverage in the mainstream media in the U.S. about the children of Syria that are living in a war zone. And you would assume there would be a lot more empathy towards saving the children in Syria, but it's pretty much almost a non-event. Obviously, we have all those other little distractions that we could talk about ad nauseum, such as the disappearance of the Malaysian airline, which seems to be sucking all the air out of media coverage right now.
Well, I wouldn't want to try to read anyone's mind, but what I think the people who are turning Obama's crank want is they want to turn Ukraine into another Syria with a total civil war. And that would really be the objective. That would be the kind of a war that would be planned there. And bad as it sounds, I think that's what Mr. Obama is really working for, whether he knows it or not. He may not have ever thought of that possibility.
Well, Chuck, my friend, as usual, our Friday chats, time flies, and thanks for joining us today, and wish you and all the listeners out there a happy St. Paddy's Day, and we'll do this again next week.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks, Chuck.
That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. The thing the men behind the curtain want is a conscious